Speaking about school, I remember when I was in high school and college, they would talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Have any of you heard of that, Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Yep, probably most of you. It's usually you get this image of a pyramid, and if our visual person could just go to the next slide, there'll be a picture, should be a picture of a pyramid. There we go. And it has the different needs. So it starts with the very basic needs. The most basic needs are on the bottom, the foundation. And before you really care about any of the other needs on top, you have to take care of the first. So first there's physiological needs, which would be the things that we need to survive. That would be food, shelter, clothing, things like that. And then after that we have safety. We want to feel safe, we want to be safe. And so if we don't want to be attacked by anyone, that's the most basic, right, the safety needs. But we also have other ways in which we feel safe in our society, and we want those things, whether it be some kind of an alarm system or nowadays video doorbells and all kinds of things like that that can help us feel safe. Then we have belonging, a sense of belonging in the community. Esteem, or how we feel about ourselves. We want to feel positive about ourselves. And then self-actualization. Sometimes we call that like finding yourself, finding your purpose or your calling in life. And so you can see why there's a certain order or a hierarchy, because you're not really going to be too concerned about finding your purpose in life if you can't find supper. Right? So you want to take care of those things first before you get on to the more higher, lofty goals. And unfortunately, in many places in the world, one thing that the ingathering reminds us is that there are places still today where those top three needs are just a dream. And so people spend their whole lives trying to survive and be safe. And the ingathering kits are a way that we can help people maybe to be able to take care of some of those needs so that perhaps they can look at some of the top three. But it's interesting to note that right above the very basic needs of living and being safe is belonging. We all have a need to belong. We want to feel that we are a part of the community, that we have a place, that we have a role. And many people don't feel that way. For many people, they feel disconnected. They feel as though they don't have a place, they don't have a role, they don't fit in with the community or maybe their family or whatever it may be. They feel disconnected. It seems like it's interesting that with all of our technology, we're very much more connected in many ways. We're connected with more people than we would otherwise be able to be. With social media, we can experience parts of people's lives that we would be able to never be able to see. And I'm not talking about what they ate for dinner, but I'm talking about things that are more important, like, an event that maybe you can't go to for one reason or another, but because of technology you can watch it, or you can see pictures from that event. And it helps us get connected and feel connected with people that we otherwise wouldn't have. And so in a way, we have more connections than we ever have. But for many people, most of those connections are skin deep. They don't go very deep. They're more superficial. And so we have less connections that are really deep. We live busy, frantic lives. We're always going somewhere, doing something. And so we lack the time, and sometimes, to be honest, we don't make it a priority to make real connections with real people. Or if so, we don't really make it a priority to make deeper connections with people. And so people feel disconnected. I went to a seminar a few years back, and I don't know if it's still true today or not, but back then, about 5 years ago, it was said that every state in the United States, for every state in the U.S., depression was at an all-time high. And so if it's true or not now, I don't know, but depression is still a very big deal. And a big factor can be a sense of disconnection from other people. You feel alone. And so part of the reason for this, and you can go ahead and advance to the next slide now, part of the reason for this is that, well, in America we have a very individualistic culture. And that can be a wonderful thing. That has accomplished a lot of things in our nation through that sense of individualism, individual rights. We all have rights, and being able to stick up for ourselves. We've built a great nation on a lot of those principles. But like most ideas, they also have their drawbacks. And one of them is that if we take it too far, we can be disconnected from people. And I think that we're experiencing some of that in modern days. Sometimes that individualism creeps into our faith as well. And so we are taught, and this is true, that our faith is about our relationship with God. But sometimes we can take that to the extreme too, and we can say our faith is all just about me and God, my relationship with God, growing in my faith. In fact, that's what I've been talking about with intentional faith development, is me and God, growing in your faith. And yet, that begs the question, if that's what faith is, then why do we need the church? Some people might ask, can I know Jesus without the church? And that question, a lot of times that question comes from a culture as ours that's individualistic. There are many places in the world where a person wouldn't even think to ask that because their culture is just different. But another part is that belief that if my faith is just me and God, then why do I need you? Why do I need to be connected with you if it's just about me and God, not you and me and God? And the easy answer is yes, you can know Jesus apart from the church, right? God is not limited by the church or anything of that nature. God can make himself known to people in many different contexts and ways, with or without the church. But nonetheless, I would say that to know the fullness of what God has for us, it helps greatly to be connected to a community of faith. And I say that realizing that many people have become disenfranchised with the church for any number of reasons. Many people have been hurt by the church, and if we were to list all of the crimes of the church throughout history and still today, we would be here for a very long time. But connecting with others in a genuine community of faith is still beneficial for us as we spur one another on in spiritual growth. Jesus said that, well, I shouldn't say Jesus said, but we've heard it said that when you marry someone, you marry their family. And when you commit to Christ, you are a part of the family of God. Jesus showed this principle when he started his ministry. He didn't start it by himself, but he gathered a group of people right away to mentor. And so he had his group of disciples, and he also had others. The 12 disciples are highlighted, but there were many others that also followed along. Maybe not quite as closely, but they followed along and supported him. Many men and women. And he started community. John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist movement, understood the importance of getting people together, not just for saying, hi, how are you doing, how's the weather, etc., but to help one another in the faith. And what he saw is that he had a colleague, George Whitefield. He had a colleague who would also preach to people out in the fields and in the places. They had a revival going through England at that time. And George Whitefield would preach to people, but he didn't organize them into groups afterwards. He would preach at a place, then leave and go to another place. And what he found is that many of those people would scatter. There wouldn't be any growth after that point. It was like just a special moment on their calendar, and then that would be it. But then John saw that when he organized people into groups, he would organize them into larger groups and then smaller groups to help them to stay accountable to one another in their spiritual growth. And what he found is that those in those groups tended to grow in their faith. And those that did not remain would become stagnant or fall away. And so he saw the importance of that. Now, there is a difference, though, as I said, between being present and being attentive. If you haven't been here the last couple of Sundays, we've been looking at 7 spiritual habits that have been shown throughout history to help us in our spiritual growth. Last week we talked about the more private, individual ones, prayer and Bible study. And today we're talking about things that we do with other people, worship and small group participation. But there's a big difference between just being present and fully participating. So I asked the kids about school, if they've ever had a moment where the teacher called on them and they had no clue what they were talking about. But let's face it, as adults, how many of you have been in a situation where you were in a conversation with somebody and maybe they were talking for 2 or 3 minutes without break and your mind wandered and then all of a sudden you realize, oh my goodness, I have no idea what they're saying. And you know the time for my response is coming soon. And so, your mind wandered, maybe you were worried about something, maybe who knows. And that happens. And that happens in worship too, doesn't it? We're in worship, maybe we intend well, but we're exhausted. Or maybe the sanctuary is extra hot that day. Or maybe we just feel really good and comfortable, and so we start to get sleepy. Or maybe you're thinking about what you have scheduled for the rest of the day. Or maybe you just cannot pay attention, so you're checking Facebook. I don't know who does that here, but other churches, that happens. No. So it's hard. It's hard to be attentive and to pay attention. And, I myself, I like to say I was called to be a pastor so that I would stay awake during the sermon. Because it's hard to fall asleep when you're the one preaching. And because in high schools, junior high school, as long as I can remember, it was hard to pay attention to the sermon. It just was. In college, and I would bob my head because I'm sleeping, you know that when you bob your head and And I would do that, but it gets really awkward when you're in the front row. And so, sometimes Jennifer would kick me in the foot to kind of wake me up a little bit there. And part of it was my fault. I didn't get enough sleep, but part of it was too, it's just hard to pay attention. And so I know how you feel. So if you're ever bobbing your head, or you're just having trouble paying attention, don't feel too bad, because your pastor does it too. But so there are those challenges, But we want to seek to be fully present in worship. So oftentimes we view worship as like a TV show. We come to worship as a consumer or as a passive audience. And we think of the congregation as the audience and the people in the front as the directors of worship. But the people receiving the worship, we feel it's the congregation. We feel that we're coming, and we might even say, I wonder what I'm going to get out of worship today. I hope it's decent. And maybe some days it seems like a good episode, and some days it seems like, I think I've seen that one before. That seems like a rerun. And so you might have that experience. But if you come to church, and we want to come to church with the expectation that God's going to speak to us. So we want to come with the expectation that something's going to happen. But if you come with the expectation or hoping that every single week you are going to get something meaningful, I hate to say this, but there are going to be some weeks you're going to be let down. And it's hopefully not because the church is doing a mediocre job. If that's the case, then that's a problem that needs to be addressed. But if the thing is that there is no way that every single sermon every week is going to get you right where you are and right where you need to be at your point in your spiritual journey every Sunday. Now, hopefully it hits some people, but it's not going to get you every single week. The songs that are picked for that particular Sunday are not going to strike a chord with you every single week. They're just not. That would be pretty much impossible to do for everyone. But the thing is that when we come to worship, oftentimes we come with the wrong mindset. Because worship is not about us. Worship is about God. And as I said in children's time, God is the audience of our worship. God is the recipient of our worship, not us. And so in reality, we are all directors of worship. And the audience is God. We're here to bless God. We're here to say thank you to God. We're here to be a blessing to God. And so when you come to church with that expectation, instead of saying, boy, I hope I get something today, we say, I hope I can be a blessing to God today. I hope I can be a blessing to others today. Well, then that puts you in a different mindset, because then you're seeking to be a blessing to others. And you're seeking to bless God. And so being attentive in worship is things like when you sing the hymns, pay attention to the words you're singing. Interestingly enough, I found out there's pros and cons to singing words on a screen for sure. But I found out that sometimes when I'm singing and I'm looking at the words on the screen for some reason without the notes, I pay more attention to the words. I don't know why that is, but I noticed that. It's like, oh, I didn't know that was in there, And but we can, and maybe it's because when you're singing in the hymnal, you're looking at the words, but you're also kind of looking at the rhythm, maybe. But when you read and sing the hymns, pay attention to what you're singing. Make it your prayer to God. And when you're praying during the prayer time, whether it be the prayer of confession or whatever, it can be easy for that to become really routine, I know. But try to make it meaningful and make it your prayer to God as much as possible. But there is a big difference between attendance and getting your name in the attendance register or being fully attentive in worship. Now, small groups is another thing, because small groups are different than worship. The focus of worship is primarily on God. The focus of getting together in smaller groups, the attention is more on one another. I mean, in some small groups, especially if it's a Bible study, yes, you're focusing on God, but you're still focusing on one another more than you are in worship. Worship is a very non-interactive thing. I mean, we all participate, but it's not like we're discussing things in the same way that you can in a smaller group setting. And so in the smaller group settings, it helps us spur one another on further in spiritual growth, because worship alone will not cut it. Think of it like a healthy diet. What if I were to tell you that I am going to start eating healthier now? And so I am going to incorporate broccoli into my diet every day. What if I were to tell you that? You'd be like, wow, that sounds pretty good. Broccoli's good for you. That's pretty good. He's going to eat broccoli every day. Wow. But then, let's say I said that, well, my goal is I was going to eat 2 pieces of broccoli every day. I'm also going to have a slice of pumpkin pie every day. And a slice of pecan pie. But I'm also going to limit my trips to Pizza Ranch to twice a week. Just twice a week. And so, none of this is true. But do you think that would be a healthy diet? Do you think that the broccoli is going to help? Well, the broccoli, it's still beneficial, right? It's better than if I didn't have the 2 pieces every day. It's still beneficial to my health and my healthy diet, but it's not alone going to transform me into a healthy person. I have to do more than just eat the broccoli. It's a step. It helps, but I have to do more, maybe cutting down on pie. But so in the same way, worship is good. We come to worship focusing on God, but let's face it, we do get blessed. Maybe not every single time, but we do get blessed when we come to worship and seek to bless God. We too are blessed, and we do grow in our faith through worship. And so worship is beneficial for our spiritual growth, but it alone is not going to make all the difference in the world. So the focus in worship is primarily on God, and we will get spiritual growth, but it alone, like eating broccoli every day, is helpful, but it's not going to transform me. You would think, and sometimes we think that the longer a person has been in church, you can do a direct correlation and say the more Sundays they've been in church, the more like Christ they are. But then that would be easy, then you could just measure by how many Sundays a person's been in church. But the thing is, I've known people who've gone to church for a year or less who are more mature in their faith than some people who have gone their entire lives. And so the number of Sundays that you're in church doesn't necessarily correlate to that. Worship is good, it's beneficial, it's important. But in addition, we want to spur one another on in growth. In other words, that means encourage one another. And one of the ways we do that is by getting together in smaller group settings where we can discuss with one another, whether it be the Bible or whether it be things that are going on in each other's lives, and then encouraging one another. Maybe it be even sharing, if it's a trusted group of people, sharing our struggles and places where we have difficulty in life, and then we can receive encouragement as well as we grow in our faith. I mentioned earlier John Wesley and how those groups were important for the spiritual growth of the people. And it's the same thing. And it doesn't always have to be an official church group. It can be U.M.W. circles, it can be Bible studies, it can be, the Sunday school class that meets not during this time, but again, maybe in January. It could be any number of church groups, but it doesn't have to be a church group. It can be you and a few other people that are seeking to grow in their faith, maybe even from other churches. But you get together on a regular basis and you hold one another accountable in a way, not meaning that you're going to get on each other's cases and judge each other, but meaning that you're going to encourage one another as you grow. It's very important. It's a good part, a good way that we can grow in our faith. Now, at this point in our sermons, we've got 4 things. There's 7 total. And you might think, well, gee, I thought Pastor Mike said that faith wasn't a to-do list. Seems like a to-do list to me. So now all of a sudden I need to pray, and I need to read the Bible, and I need to go to worship, and I need to do a small group. What else is it, Mike? Where do I find time for all this stuff? And we have to be careful about getting legalistic about things. So, worshiping God is important. There may be seasons when you can't. Whether it be, like I said, maybe, you won't hear a lot of pastors say this, but maybe you need a break if you've been hurt by someone. Maybe you can't worship because your job does not allow you to do it very easily, or maybe you can't do it every weekend. Things come up, things happen. And so we don't want to get legalistic and say that, oh my goodness, you haven't been in worship 2 days out of the year. I mean, come on, So we want to be careful about that. But we want to see the value in getting together for worship, small group participation. We want to see the value in looking at the Bible on a regular basis and in spending time in conversation with God. Because these things can help us to become more like Christ. So I'd like to encourage you. I know that many of you're like, yeah, I already come to worship. Here I am. But I just want to encourage you that some of these spiritual habits, you'll see there are things that you are already incorporating. Some of them may be things you're not. But just look at where you are in your faith and see what might my next steps be. And we as a church be happy to help you along the way.